I stood backstage at Harvard's commencement ceremony, hands trembling as the dean adjusted his microphone. In 3 minutes, my father would learn that the anonymous donor who paid off his mortgage, the one he'd been bragging about to his country club friends for 6 months, was me. The daughter he bet $50,000 would never amount to anything. The same daughter he'd mocked at his dinner parties, calling my acceptance letter a clerical error. My phone buzzed, a text from my half-brother. Dad's in the third row, wearing that smug smile. I pocketed the phone and smoothed my doctoral robes, wondering if redemption always had to taste this bittersweet.
The bet happened on my 18th birthday, right after I blew out the candles on a grocery store cake. Dad set down his scotch and looked at me with that expression he reserved for broken appliances, mild annoyance mixed with the certainty of disposal. "Harvard," he said, laugh lines crinkling. "You think Harvard wants a girl who got a B in calculus?" Mom's hand found mine under the table. She squeezed once, a silent plea for me to let it go, but I'd spent 18 years letting things go. My acceptance letter was 2 weeks old, hidden in my desk drawer like a love note I was too afraid to read aloud. "I got in," I said. "Early action. Full ride." The room went quiet. My half-brother Trevor paused mid-bite of cake. Dad's girlfriend Cheryl, the third one since the divorce, stopped scrolling on her phone. Dad leaned back in his chair, the lever creaking like old bones. "Full ride," he repeated. "To Harvard. Dean scholarship, covers tuition, room, board, everything." Dad pulled out his checkbook, the one he used for dramatic effect at restaurants when he wanted to prove a point about his generosity. He scribbled something, tore off the check, and slid it across the table. $50,000, made out to himself, dated 1 year from today. "If you last a full semester at Harvard, I'll tear this up. If you drop out, transfer, or flunk out, which we both know you will, you owe me 50 grand. Call it motivation." Trevor's eyes widened. Even Cheryl looked uncomfortable. Mom's grip on my hand turned painful. "That's not—" Mom started. "It's fine," I said. I picked up the check, folded it, and tucked it into my pocket. "I'll last more than a semester." Dad raised his scotch. "To delusions of grandeur." I didn't touch my cake. I went upstairs, pulled out my acceptance letter, and read it until the words blurred. Then I opened my laptop and started researching every scholarship, grant, and work-study program Harvard offered. If I was going to survive this, I needed more than pride. I needed a plan. The first year at Harvard felt like learning to breathe underwater. My roommate Sierra was a legacy student whose parents had donated a library wing. She had monogrammed luggage and a skincare routine that cost more than my monthly food budget. But she also had a brother who dropped out after freshman year, so she understood the weight of expectation. "Your dad sounds like a piece of work," she said one night after I told her about the bet. We were studying in our dorm room, surrounded by textbooks and energy drink cans. "He's a real estate developer," I said, as if that explained everything. "He thinks the world runs on leverage and calling people's bluffs." "Does it?" "Sometimes." I highlighted a passage in my economics textbook. "But not always." I worked 3 jobs that year: tutoring underclassmen, manning the library circulation desk, and doing freelance graphic design for local businesses. I slept 5 hours a night and learned to make a single meal stretch across 3 days. Every Sunday, I called Mom. Every Sunday, she asked if I'd heard from Dad. Every Sunday, I said no. The check lived in my desk drawer, unfolded now, a daily reminder. I taped it to my wall during finals week, a talisman against failure. When I passed microeconomics with an A-, I bought a frame for it. A classmate asked if it was a personal check from someone famous. I told her it was a promise I'd made to myself. Spring semester brought Professor Keating, who taught venture capital and had a face like a retired boxer. He walked into class on the first day and wrote a single question on the board. What would you do with $100 million? We spent the next 2 hours debating. Some students said they'd invest in index funds. Others talked about real estate portfolios or starting nonprofits. When he called on me, I hesitated. The answer felt too raw, too specific. I'd buy my mother a house. Then I'd create a scholarship fund for first-generation students, so they don't have to work themselves to exhaustion just to prove they belong. Professor Keating nodded slowly. Interesting. Most people lead with personal security. You led with community. He circled my name on his attendance sheet. See me after class. That meeting changed everything. Professor Keating had connections to venture capital firms, angel investors, and alumni donors who funded student startups. He saw something in me, maybe desperation, maybe hunger, and decided to cultivate it. By the end of sophomore year, I'd co-founded a micro-investment app called Common Thread that helped low-income students pool resources for shared expenses. By junior year, we had 50,000 users and interest from major tech investors. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell anyone except Mom and Sierra. The app grew, quietly, steadily, like a plant reaching towards distant sunlight. When we sold it during my senior year for $30 million, the news broke on TechCrunch before I could process it myself. My phone exploded with messages. Sierra screamed and tackled me in our dorm room hallway. Professor Keating sent a single text. Told ya. Dad called an hour later. I stared at his name on my screen, watched it ring 4 times, and let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. I used half the money to pay off Mom's medical debt from her cancer treatment 2 years prior, the bills Dad had refused to help with because they were her responsibility now. The other half went into investments and a trust fund for future scholarships. I lived in the same dorm room, ate the same dining hall food, and kept tutoring students who reminded me of my 18-year-old self. Senior year, I applied to Harvard's doctoral program in economics. When I got in with a fellowship to study wealth inequality and social mobility, I framed that acceptance letter too. I hung it next to the check Dad had written, a diptych of everything I'd been told I couldn't do. But the bet still sat between us, uncollected and unresolved. A year had become 4, and Dad had never mentioned it again. Sometimes I wondered if he'd forgotten. More often I know he hadn't. The summer before my doctoral program started, I went home to see Mom. She'd moved to a small condo in Portland after the divorce, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with mismatched tiles, and a view of a parking lot that she swore was charming in the right light. I'd bought her a house in Marin County 6 months prior, but she refused to move until she felt ready. That was Mom's way of saying she didn't want to admit she needed help. We spent the weekend cooking and watching old movies. She didn't ask about the app sale directly, but she had a new way of looking at me. Part pride, part bewilderment, like I'd grown an extra limb she wasn't sure how to acknowledge. "Your father called me last month," she said on Sunday morning. We were making pancakes, her specialty, though she always burned the first one. "He wanted to know if you'd been in touch." "What did you tell him?" "That you're busy, that you're thriving." She flipped a pancake, and it landed perfectly. She turned to face me, spatula in hand. "Sweetheart, I know what he did was cruel, but he's still your father." "Biologically." She sighed. "Anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." "I'm not angry. I'm just done." That wasn't entirely true. Anger was there, a low hum beneath everything else, but it had transformed over the years into something more useful. Fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, every time a professor doubted me or a classmate dismissed my ideas, I thought about Dad's laugh at that birthday dinner. And then I worked harder. Mom served the pancakes and we ate in comfortable silence. Before I left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You've already won. You know that, right?" I didn't answer because I wasn't sure. Winning implied a finish line, and I still felt like I was running.
The doctoral program was a different beast. The students were sharper, hungrier, and more willing to destroy each other for a favorable recommendation. My cohort included a former hedge fund manager, 2 Fulbright scholars, and a guy who'd published in the American Economic Review as an undergrad. Imposter syndrome crept back, whispering that I'd gotten lucky, that the app sale was a fluke, that Dad had been right all along. But I had Professor Keating in my corner, and I had Mom's voice in my head reminding me that survival was its own form of victory. I threw myself into research, focusing on how micro-investments could disrupt generational poverty. My dissertation proposal got approved within 3 months. By the end of my first year, I'd co-authored a paper that got picked up by the New York Times. That's when the university's development office reached out. They wanted to discuss a potential donation. I met with the director, a warm, polished woman named Dr. Huang, who had the kind of warm efficiency that made you feel both comfortable and scrutinized. She said, "We've been following your work. Your research on wealth mobility aligns perfectly with our institutional mission. Have you considered establishing a scholarship fund?" "I've thought about it. We have a model that might interest you. Anonymous endowments for first-generation students with a focus on STEM and economics. The fund could be structured to grow over time, supporting dozens of students every year." I asked about the logistics. She walked me through tax structures, naming opportunities, and legacy planning. When she mentioned that major donors often funded facilities or professorships, an idea rooted. Not just a scholarship fund, something bigger, something that would echo. What if I wanted to do more? Not just scholarships. What if I wanted to address student debt, fund community programs, maybe even help faculty with housing costs? Dr. Huang's expression shifted. "How much are we talking about?" "Enough to make a difference." Over the next 6 months, I worked with financial advisors, lawyers, and the development office to structure a gift. I liquidated investments, sold my remaining stake in Common Thread's parent company, and set up a trust that would grow over decades. The number kept climbing. 50 million, 80 million, 120 million. It felt abstract, like monopoly money, until Dr. Huang showed me projections of how many students it would help. This is transformative, generational. I asked for 2 conditions. First, the donation would remain anonymous until I was ready to reveal it. Second, part of the fund would be used to help students' families in crisis. Medical bills, housing insecurity, emergency loans. Dr. Huang agreed immediately. The paperwork took months. During that time, I learned that Dad's real estate business was struggling. Trevor mentioned it casually during a rare phone call, his voice tight with the stress of trying to manage their father's declining empire. Dad had overextended himself on a commercial property development, and the market had shifted. He was hemorrhaging money, leveraging assets to cover debts, and his mortgage was underwater. "He won't admit it, but he's scared," Trevor said. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I thought you'd want to know, and because—" Trevor paused. "He talks about you sometimes, when he's had too much to drink. He wonders if you're doing okay. He has my number." "Yeah, he does." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen. The donation agreement was open, waiting for my final signature. On impulse, I called Dr. Huang. "Can we add another component? I want to create a fund that helps families of students dealing with financial emergencies. Specifically, I want to pay off mortgages for parents who are at risk of foreclosure." "That's incredibly generous. Do you have specific families in mind?" "Just one." Dr. Huang was silent for a moment. "We can structure that. It would need to be done through the general fund to maintain anonymity, but it's feasible." I gave her Dad's information. His name, his address, his mortgage details that Trevor had mentioned in passing. Dr. Huang promised discretion. 6 weeks later, Dad received a letter from Harvard's Alumni and Development Office informing him that his mortgage had been paid in full by an anonymous donor. The letter emphasized that this was part of a larger initiative to support families connected to the Harvard community. Trevor called me, breathless. "Did you hear?" "What hear?" "Dad's mortgage. Someone paid it off. $140,000. Just gone. He thinks it's some kind of mistake, but the bank confirmed it." "That's good,"
I said. He needed help. He's been telling everyone it's because of his connections, that someone in the Harvard network recognized his contributions to the community. He doesn't have any contributions. He's just lucky.
Commencement season arrived with the weight of inevitability. I'd finished my doctoral dissertation, a 400-page exploration of micro-investment strategies in generational wealth transfer, and defended it in front of a committee that picked apart every footnote and regression model. Professor Keating sat in the back row, grinning like a proud uncle. When they unanimously approved it, he took me off for Thai food and told me I'd made him look good. "You made yourself look good," I said. "I just provided the data." "Don't downplay it. You're going to change how people think about economic mobility." He raised his glass of water. "To Dr. Chen, and to wherever you go next." I clinked my glass against his, but the future felt murky. I had job offers from think tanks and universities, but none of them felt right. I wanted to keep building, keep creating systems that help people like 18-year-old me. The donations were a start, but they weren't enough. Dr. Huang called a week before commencement. "The dean wants to publicly acknowledge your gift during the ceremony. We've kept it anonymous as you requested, but given the magnitude, no. It's customary for major donors to be recognized." "I don't want recognition. I want students to have opportunities." Dr. Huang sighed. "What if we framed it differently? What if the announcement focused on the fund's impact and you were introduced as the architect rather than a philanthropist? It might inspire others." I thought about Dad, sitting in the audience somewhere, basking in the residual glory of having a daughter who graduated from Harvard. He'd RSVP'd for the ceremony. Mom had mentioned it in passing, her voice carefully neutral. He was bringing Cheryl and some business associates, planning to make a weekend of it. "If I agree," I said slowly, "I need the announcement to be specific. I want them to mention the Mortgage Assistance Fund, and I want the dean to explain exactly how many families have been helped." That's very doable. "And I don't want it framed as charity. I want it framed as investment. These families aren't recipients. They're partners in building a more equitable system." Dr. Huang was quiet for a moment. "You've thought about this?" "I've had 4 years to think about it." The next week blurred. Mom flew in 2 days early, staying at my apartment and fussing over my doctoral robes. Sierra came back for the ceremony, bringing her new fiancé and a bottle of champagne she insisted we save for after. Trevor sent a text saying he'd be there, sitting far away from Dad, but present nonetheless. The morning of commencement, I woke at 5. My stomach churned with nerves that had nothing to do with academic achievement. I made coffee, burnt toast, and stared at the framed check on my wall. $50,000, the price Dad had put on my failure. I'd never cashed it, never even deposited it. It hung there as a reminder, but also as a question. What did it mean to win a bet that should never have been made? Mom knocked on my bedroom door. "Sweetheart, you need to start getting ready." "I know." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." She came in and sat on the edge of my bed. Her hair had gone more gray in the past year, and she moved with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body had betrayed her once and might do so again. But her eyes were bright, fierce with pride. "He's going to be there," she said. "Your father. And when the dean makes that announcement, he's going to realize what you've done. I didn't do it for him. I know, but it's still going to matter." I didn't know how to explain that I'd done it for both of us, the daughter who'd needed to prove something, and the father who had been so afraid of his own inadequacy that he'd projected it onto me. Paying off his mortgage wasn't forgiveness. It was closure. The ceremony was held in Harvard Yard, under a sky so blue it looked photoshopped. Thousands of graduates filled the rows, their robes a sea of crimson. Parents crowded the stands, cameras ready. I spotted Mom in the 4th row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue before anything had even started. Trevor was 3 rows behind her, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortably tight. And there, in the 3rd row, was Dad. He looked older. His hair had thinned, and his face had the ruddy, puffy quality of someone who'd spent too many nights self-medicating with scotch. Cheryl was sitting beside him, bored, scrolling on her phone. And his business associates, 2 men in expensive suits, flanked them, talking quietly about something that made Dad laugh. I looked away. The ceremony began with speeches from university officials, then moved to student speakers. A valedictorian from the college spoke about resilience. A graduate student from the law school talked about justice. When the dean of my program stepped up to the microphone, my heart started hammering.
"Before we confer degrees," Dean Morrison said, his voice echoing across the yard, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge an extraordinary gift to this university. Over the past year, an anonymous donor has established a fund that will transform the lives of countless students and their families. This fund provides scholarships, emergency assistance, and, most uniquely, mortgage relief for families facing housing insecurity. To date, it has helped 37 families keep their homes, it has supported 212 students through financial crises, and it has fundamentally changed how we think about supporting our community." Dean Morrison paused. "Today, at her request, I'm honored to reveal the identity of this donor. Dr. Maya Chen, who will be receiving her doctorate in economics, has contributed $120 million to ensure that students like her, first generation, resilient, brilliant, have the resources they need to thrive." The applause started slowly, then built into a roar. I stood, my legs shaking, and walked toward the stage. The world narrowed to the path in front of me, the dean's extract hand, the microphone waiting. But before I took the stage, I looked back. Mom was sobbing openly, her hands over her mouth. Trevor was clapping, his face split with a grin. And there, Dad. Dad sat frozen. His face had gone pale, his mouth slightly open. Cheryl had stopped scrolling. The business associates were looking at him, waiting for his reaction. I watched him put the pieces together. The anonymous donor, the mortgage, the daughter he'd bet against. I climbed the stairs and shook the dean's hand. Dean Morrison handed me the microphone. My hands were steady now, the nervousness burned away by something sharper. I looked out at the sea of faces, graduates, parents, faculty, and found my voice. "Thank you, Dean Morrison. I didn't prepare a speech because I didn't think I'd be standing here today. Not because I doubted my abilities, but because 4 years ago someone very close to me made it clear he doubted them for me." The crowd went quiet. This wasn't the usual graduation platitude. When I was 18, I was offered a bet, $50,000 if I dropped out, flunked out, or failed to prove I belonged here. It was meant to motivate me, but what it actually did was teach me that some people measure worth in dollars and fear. That bet shaped everything I've done since. Every late night studying, every side job, every moment I wanted to quit. I kept going because I refused to let someone else's limitations define me. I saw Mom crying harder now, her tissue disintegrating. Trevor was filming on his phone. Dad's face was unreadable. This donation isn't about me. It's about every student who's been told they're not smart enough, not rich enough, not connected enough to succeed. It's about their families who sacrifice everything to give their children a chance. And it's about building a system where opportunity isn't contingent on wealth or status or someone's willingness to believe in you. I paused, letting the words settle. Part of this fund paid off 37 mortgages. One of those mortgages belonged to my father. He doesn't know that. Until now. The crowd's murmur turned into something else. Surprise, discomfort, fascination. I could feel the cameras swiveling, searching for him. I didn't do it as revenge. I did it because I wanted to prove that kindness isn't weakness. That helping someone who hurt you doesn't mean they were right. It means you're strong enough to choose generosity over bitterness. My voice cracked slightly. Dad, if you're listening, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just sad that you couldn't see what I was capable of until it was framed in numbers large enough to impress your friends. But I hope this helps. I hope you use this second chance to be kinder to the next person who needs your support. I handed the microphone back to Dean Morrison. The applause was different now, softer, more contemplative. I walked back to my seat, my legs wobbling, and sank into the chair. Sierra reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're insane, and also my hero." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Degrees were conferred, names were called, hats were thrown. I walked across the stage again to receive my diploma, shook hands with faculty, and smiled for photos. But my mind was elsewhere, circling around the inevitable confrontation. After the ceremony, graduates spilled onto the lawn for photos with families. I found Mom first. She grabbed me in a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. So proud. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Trevor appeared next, grinning awkwardly. "That was brutal, in the best way possible." "Where is he?" "He's talking to his friends. I think they're trying to figure out if they should congratulate him or pity him." "Let them figure it out." We took photos. Me, Mom, me and Trevor, me with Sierra and her fiancé. Professor Keating found me and gave me a bear hug that lifted me off the ground. Other students from my cohort stopped by to congratulate me, some with genuine warmth, others with the calculating look of people realizing they should have been nicer. And then, finally, Dad approached. He walked slowly, like someone navigating a minefield. Cheryl trailed behind him looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. His business associates had vanished. When he stopped in front of me, he opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. "Maya." "Dad?" We stood there, two people separated by 4 years and a chasm of unsaid things. Up close, he looked even more worn. His eyes were red-rimmed and his hands trembled slightly. "That was quite a speech," he said finally. It was honest. "You paid off my mortgage. I helped 37 families. Yours was one of them." He flinched. "Why?" "Because you needed help. And because I wanted to prove that generosity doesn't require agreement. You don't have to believe in me for me to believe in doing the right thing." Dad looked at Mom, who was standing a few feet away, watching me with wary eyes. "Did you know about this?" I knew she was brilliant. I didn't need a donation announcement to tell me that. "I didn't mean—" Dad stopped, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Maya. The things I said, I thought I was toughening you up, preparing you for how hard the world is. The world was already hard. You just made it harder." "I know, He rubbed his face, and for the first time I saw him cry. Not sobbing, just silent tears tracking down his cheeks. "I was so afraid you'd end up like me. Stuck. Mediocre. I wanted to push you, but I pushed too hard, and I lost you." I felt something in my chest loosen. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of it. "You didn't lose me. I'm right here." "Are you?" I thought about the 18-year-old girl who'd folded that check and promised herself she'd prove him wrong. I thought about the nights I'd cried from exhaustion, the moments I'd wanted to quit, the fear that had chased me through every success. And I thought about the woman I'd become, not despite him, but in the space his doubt had created. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to find out." Dad nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My heart stuttered when I recognized it, the original check, yellowed and creased. He'd been carrying it. "I never cashed this either," he said. "I told myself I was waiting to see if you'd make it, but really, I was just scared of what it would mean if you did." He tore the check in half, then in quarters, then into pieces so small they looked like confetti. He held them out to me, and I cupped my hands to catch them. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." I looked at the pieces of paper, at the sum that had haunted me for years, now rendered meaningless. Then I looked at my father, this flawed, frightened man who'd shaped me in ways both terrible and necessary. "I forgive you," I said, "but I'm not forgetting. If we're going to rebuild this, it has to be different. You have to be different." "I will be. I promise." I didn't know if I believed him, but I knew that I was strong enough now to walk away if he broke that promise, and that was enough.
3 months after commencement, I accepted a position at a think tank in Washington, D.C., focusing on economic policy and wealth inequality. The work was challenging, invigorating, and exactly what I needed. I rented an apartment near DuPont Circle, filled it with secondhand furniture and more books than shelves, and started building a life that felt entirely mine. Mom visited once a month, finally ready to move into the house I'd bought her. She spent weekends picking out paint colors and planting a garden that she swore would be therapeutic. Trevor came too, bringing his girlfriend and stories about how Dad was attending therapy and had started volunteering at a community center. I listened, cautiously hopeful. Dad called every Sunday. The first few conversations were stilted, full of long pauses and careful words, but slowly we found a rhythm. He asked about my work, and I told him about policy briefs and congressional meetings. I asked about his business, and he admitted he'd scaled back, focusing on smaller projects that didn't require leveraging his soul. "I'm learning to be satisfied with enough," he said during one call. "It's harder than it sounds." I know. One Sunday, 6 months after graduation, he asked if he could visit. I hesitated, then agreed. He flew out alone, no Cheryl, no business associates, and met me at a coffee shop near my apartment. We sat by the window, watching tourists navigate the metro map, and drank overpriced lattes. "I've been thinking about what you said," Dad began, "about being kinder. I want to do something meaningful, but I don't know where to start." "Start small. Volunteer. Mentor someone. Show up for the people who need you." "Like I should have shown up for you?" "Yeah, like that." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was him at the community center Trevor had mentioned, standing with a group of teenagers in front of a whiteboard covered in business plan sketches. He's teaching a workshop on entrepreneurship for kids from low-income families. Half of them remind me of you at that age. So hungry, so determined. I want to make sure I'm the person who believes in them, not the one who doubts them. I felt tears prick my eyes. "That's good, Dad. That's really good." We talked for hours. He told me about his therapy sessions, about confronting the fear that had driven him to measure success in transactions rather than relationships. I told him about my work, about the policy proposals I was drafting, and the students I was mentoring through video calls. Before he left, he hugged me. It was awkward, tentative, but real. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said that 4 years ago, but I'm saying it now." "Thank you." And Maya, thank you for not giving up on me. I watched him walk away, his shoulders a little straighter, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. Back at my apartment, I pulled out the pieces of the torn check. I'd kept them in a small box on my desk, unsure what to do with them. Now I took them to the kitchen, dropped them into a bowl, and lit a match. The paper curled and blackened, releasing a thin plume of smoke. I watched until there was nothing left but ash. Then I opened my laptop and started drafting a new proposal. The scholarship fund was operational, but I wanted to expand it. More students, more families, more pathways out of the cycles that trapped people in scarcity. I emailed Dr. Huang, outlining my ideas. She responded within an hour. "Let's talk. This is exactly what we need." The work continued. Some days were hard, full of bureaucratic delays and policy setbacks. But other days brought emails from scholarship recipients telling me they'd graduated or landed their dream jobs or bought their parents a house. Those emails went into a folder I labeled Reasons. Sierra visited it in the fall, newly married and glowing. We walked along the National Mall, eating ice cream and catching up. She asked if I'd started dating, and I admitted I'd been on a few awkward first dates, but nothing serious. You're allowed to prioritize yourself, you know? Not everything has to be about fixing systems or proving points. I know, but I like fixing systems. Then find someone who likes fixing systems with you. I laughed. Is that how you found your husband? More or less. He's an environmental engineer. We bond over infrastructure. That night, I went home and updated my dating profile. I added a line about loving policy debates and Thai food. Within a week, I matched with an economist who worked at the World Bank. Our first date was a 3-hour dinner where we argued about universal basic income and housing policy. Our second date was a market where we bought too many vegetables and made a terrible stir-fry. By the third date, I realized I was falling for someone who saw the world the way I did, as something broken but fixable, painful but worth fighting for. Winter brought the first major dispersal from the scholarship fund. 200 students received financial aid packages. 12 families had their mortgages paid off. The local news ran a story about the program, interviewing a single mother who'd been days away from foreclosure. She cried on camera, talking about the anonymous donor who'd saved her home. I watched the segment twice, then called Mom. "Did you see it?" "I did. You're changing lives, sweetheart." "We're changing lives. This was only possible because you taught me what resilience looks like." Mom was quiet for a moment. "Your father called me yesterday. He wanted to know if you'd be coming home for the holidays." "What did you tell him?" "That it's your decision, but that he's welcome at my table if he promises to behave." I thought about it. The idea of a family holiday still felt fragile, like something that might shatter if held too tightly. But maybe that was okay. Maybe rebuilding didn't require perfection, just the willingness to keep trying. "Tell him I'll be there, but I'm bringing someone." "The economist?" "His name is James, and yes." Mom laughed. "I can't wait to meet him." Christmas came cold and clear. I drove to Marin County with James, the car loaded with gifts and a tray of Mom's famous pancakes that I'd learned to make without burning. The house was decorated modestly, a small tree, string lights, a wreath on the door. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and pine. Mom greeted us with hugs and an immediate interrogation of James, who handled it with grace and humor. Trevor arrived with his girlfriend, and we spent the afternoon playing board games and telling stories. Dad showed up at 4, carrying a box of wine and a nervousness that made him look younger. "Maya, thank you for letting me be here. Don't make me regret it." He smiled faintly. "I'll do my best." Dinner was chaotic and warm. We talked about everything: work, relationships, the disastrous stir-fry James and I had made. Dad told a story about his volunteer work, and Trevor shared news about a promotion. Mom presided over it all, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside. "He has something for you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 made out to the scholarship fund. "I can't undo the past, but I can try to build a better future. I want to contribute, not as penance, but as partnership." I looked at the check, then at him. "You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to." I folded the check and slipped it into my pocket. "Thank you." We stood there for a moment. Two people learning to forgive and be forgiven. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. Later, as James and I drove back to D.C., he asked what I was thinking about. "Bets," I said, "and how the best ones are the ones you make with yourself." "Did you win yours?" I thought about the 18-year-old girl who'd folded a check and promised herself she'd prove everyone wrong. I thought about the woman I'd become, the lives I'd touched, the family I was slowly rebuilding. "Yeah, I think I did." The road stretched ahead, dark and full of possibility. The radio played softly, and James reached over to hold my hand. I looked out the window at the stars, at the distant lights of the city, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace.